it develops real-time embedded systems for a rapidly growing market with extreme time-to-market pressures. And so basically here what the authors are trying to describe is the rationale behind selecting this particular project as their case study for organizational development. They argue that the department, it engages in a number of cross-site collaborations. There are different sites within their own product group with other corporate divisions as well as with other companies. So so they think that it's pretty large scale. And it's a new product release, so they thought that, of course, there would be many surprises, many interesting surprises to study. And the data was gathered from these two locations, the UK and Germany. And if you have studied more about the work done by James C. Herbstep and Rebecca Idunda, you would be able to see that they continued with this work, and a third site was actually added later on to this empirical analysis, which was in India, and they studied how that changed the scenario. So this is a quick overview of the case study that they chose for their analysis. The key challenges that were associated with this case study were languages, cultures, and time zones. So the main focus of this study is how geographic distribution. How exactly we're focused on one key problem in the debate of organizational development, that is geographic distribution. We are not talking about technical problems, or we are not talking about any managerial problems. We are talking about the fact how geographic distribution in particular affects communication and coordination. This was what the study was about. And geographic distribution, what are the key factors which might be challenging to achieve coordination are languages. For instance, in the UK, they have English, and in Germany they have German, and of course there are different dialects and different accents, and of course the teams can select one medium of interaction, but sometimes there are events in which confusion occurs because of language as a barrier. And culture, how can culture be?
But many a times, if you are working in the cross geographical teams, both team members have decent amount of knowledge in English or whatever the common communication language is, then how that becomes as a challenge or a barrier.
So what you're saying is that most of the time people know English, then of course there is no problem. But the problem is if people are speaking different languages. And also there are different subtleties in different languages. Like German people, they have their own way of speaking. They will rush abruptly to the problem itself rather than politely introducing themselves first, maybe, as observed by their British counterparts. So there are those problems as well. And not just between UK and Germany, if a food for thought, if you have teams which are geographically distributed across Africa or across the Indian subcontinent or across the Asia Pacific or across China or across South America, and you have multiple sites. So language is a challenge which definitely should be kept under consideration while developing an effective organizational structure. It is definitely a challenge which should be kept under consideration, even if it's on because unanticipated events occur. And then culture is a big challenge. How do you think is culture a big challenge in coordinating work? How do you think is culture a barrier? Because people, they are. I personally do not think that culture is that much of an issue. I personally do not think so. But do you have any insights as to why culture might be a challenge?
Culture can be challenged because in different...
I mean, nobody cares about who eats what or who eats what or who dresses like what while designing a software.
That's not the culture, but in different English, there can be the different words of same phrases. In that way, the culture matters. I don't have any phrase on the top of my head right now, but in Australian English or British English, they might be calling something as a different, and in America, they call it as something as a different. And in that case, the culture makes culture a challenge.
Something like what?
I don't have anything right on the top of my head, but there are some words that are exclusive to India, but when you talk here, people don't understand them well, or maybe something like that.
In English versus Britain English, there's the term butt. That means a trunk of a car. But if you don't know that, and they're saying you put it in the butt.
But that is language.
No, that is culture.
That is culture, yes. That's the correct example of culture.
Those two are not inseparable in that case.
Or if you think
I'm
about
looking for an explicit problem related to culture.
Okay, so one time when we're designing, like some cultures, if you think about work ethic, so in America we really
Work
like
ethic.
a 9 to 5, like we have the 9 to 5 mentality. However, in some countries they may work, 14 or 20-hour days. So it may be, that could be a challenge if you work with somebody overseas and they don't believe in, or a culture, if you think about Christmas or holidays, some cultures don't believe in Christmas.
Okay.
And so you're working with somebody who, if you want to,
office hours, holidays. Okay.
right, if you want to take a break and not work on a project on Christmas, and they're like, well, my culture, we don't believe in Christmas, that could be a challenge.
Right. So what Kiara has said that the various cultural challenges which we might face because of geographic distribution might include work hours, like we have we might have different hours, working hours in USA, and we might have different working hours in Australia, and we have different holidays. Okay, so time zones and okay. And time zones, of course, if a time zone can be a big challenge. Why? Because when a team, if team A in one continent has a problem which it wants to resolve, it's in one time zone, and the other team does not have is not present at the office at that time zone. So, don't you think that time zone is something which can be which is the easiest to cater for, because it's the constant factor here. Time zone is a constant factor here because the time zone will remain constant, and we can always achieve.
Well,
Wait.
problem, time zones are not constant.
More or less.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
And I don't think it'll be the easiest problem to solve either.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Ethiopia 2 years ago, 3 weeks before it was supposed to happen, we're not doing daylight savings time this year. And there's always one-off cases. Time zones are not an easy problem to be solved.
Okay.
In early 19th century or 20th century, America had like 1600 time zones. Now we are down to 4.
Yeah.
But in
And
that case,
not all
we're
the
talking
states-
about a different
Yeah.
century.
But not all the states adhere within our time zones.
Okay. So you think the time zone is a big challenge?
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
I think language is probably the easiest challenge to overcome.
And which do you think is the easiest challenge to overcome?
I do, I personally.
Out of those three or out of everything?
Out of these three.
Okay.
I still am looking for an effective example related to culture difference.
Related to them.
Culture.
So you have colors, what they mean, that's culture.
So what would be, well, you give us an example of what you're thinking.
Colors, culture, if the most, I think if we're designing the artistic part of a project, maybe, culture can have a significant impact on that.
Okay.
But if you're just developing technical details,
Right,
then I
I
don't
say
think
give us
the culture
an
is that
example.
much of an issue.
I can give you an example about culture problem, maybe that an example.
Okay.
In
Great.
French culture, when I'm talking to my manager, I need to give some respect. I cannot directly call with his first name as a Chris. I may need to add something in that. But if we call it as by his first name, sometimes those people get offended. The same with the Japanese culture as well.
Bridging up.
Interesting.
Bridging.
Here.
I'm sorry?
Sorry. Can I add something here? I
Sure.
really want you to think about how organizational development helps you or does not help you understand, how organizational development perspective helps you or does not help you understand issues of identity, efficiency, and coordination in your design, right? How does that, as an analytic perspective, help you understand these important qualities of CSCW systems? So the question isn't so much whether there are conflicts between time zones, right, or cultures, but how does an organizational identity perspective help you understand what those conflicts are and how to address them, right? So just like, I'd like you to kind of try to raise up the discussion from, well, are there cultural differences, to how does organizational behavior help you see those more clearly than you would just from your own gut experience, okay?
Right. So,
Well, that shut you up.
in the paper itself, to achieve effective coordination among geographically distributed teams, the authors have studied 3 different kinds of mechanisms. One was based on the architecture, that the project generated the system architecture with Orbix. Orbix is an application development product tool, and the code was developed manually based on the design agreements. The designers how they agreed, and then the code was developed, and each component was developed at a single site. And some of the related difficulties with this model was the interface specifications. Since while collaborating across different sites, there were technical difficulties related to the code, and which should have been taken into account in the design. Apart from that, there were developers, they proceeded unknowingly with incorrect assumptions about other components. There was not an effective coordination here. The discrepancies, they remained hidden during unit testing, but were only revealed during the integration phase in the end. When a developer identified a conflict, he tried to identify the people responsible for the components that use the interface, and then tried to work out specification refinements. And the refinements, they were infrequently recorded in the documentation because that took time away from development. So basically, when there were different discrepancies, when there were different disagreements between different parts of the code, the refinements, they were infrequently recorded in the documentation. So these are particular case study. And then there were complications when one person who was developing left and a new person took over, so he had to go through that entire process of understanding how the system worked, and so that led to delay in completing that part of the work. And during testing, tests generated bug reports because there was total isolation between different sites. So these were the different difficulties related to architecture. And plan-based coordination, the project, it initially had a 40-step integration plan as to how the different pieces would be gathered together and integrated. But as in the end they saw that the integration part was the hardest, so it kind of deviated from their initial plan, because during the integration plan they had a number of surprises. And so this study basically highlighted the effect of the unanticipated events which occur during different parts of the project. Maybe for this project, integration was the most challenging phase, but maybe for other projects, some other phases might be the most difficult. And then some of the difficulties related to this particular kind of mechanism were the changing requirements, the staff turnover, and the extreme schedule pressures. And as they saw that the plan, they missed a critical initial step building the product substrate environment, which was the last part of the product development. And the third coordination mechanism was the process-based coordination. I am deliberately going quickly with these mechanisms because I want to focus more on the cross-cutting themes of efficiency, identity, and coordination in the end. And I would also like to relate this study to the papers that we have discussed so far in the class at the end. The process-based coordination, the developers, they use a number of processes to help organize and structure the development environment. And each development site had its own change management process. As you will see in the studies conducted later on, that they had a change management process to effectively counter for the evolving changes and in the design process. Like for instance, if a person leaves, that is one change. If the old technology fails and a new technology has to be used instead of that, that is a change. If a design problem that was, if a design structure, if a certain design which was planned to be implemented in the initial phase, it was changed later on because it was not viable or practical. So you can expect a lot of changes while developing any project. This isolation supported rapid development by allowing developers to get their changes into the local builds quickly. The key problem was integration. We have talked about that a lot. And the build processes at the two sites diverged over time. The change control board was slow. The system developed by one side. These are some very bland observations based on just this case study. And to learn more about organizational development, how structures are organized, how organizational structures are developed, constructed, and what are the different areas. We need to have more case studies. So far we have, and then since we have talked about Conway's law, what was Conway's law about? Conway's law said that the structure of the organization kind of mirrors the structure structure of the system which is being developed, because the developers, they have to coordinate with one another, communicate with one another, so it kind of mirrors that. And Parnas's hypothesis was that modular design might be effective. Then there is another law called Brooks law. Brooks law says that if your project is falling apart, then adding more people to the project will actually complicate matters. So adding more people to the project actually complicates matters. And then apart from geographic distribution, one key factor which was studied in this paper was the importance of informal communication, which kind of was not possible to achieve in teams which were geographically distributed. Like the importance of informal communication was highlighted. The communication that the two co-workers might have over lunch break, or around the coffee machine, or if somebody is dropping the other person back at home, or if they have just developed a good mutual understanding. That informal communication solves a number of problems, which is kind of left out when teams are geographically distributed. So the paper highlights the importance of that informal communication. They basically give an example as well that sometimes when there is a problem which is trivial, when it can be solved within a couple of minutes if the people are working together. But if that problem, but to solve that same problem, if you have to go to if you have to reach out to a person sitting on a different continent, then a lot of other factors might come into play which can cause delay. Eventually your problem will get solved, but this will create time delays. So it is.
She asked us to continually think about how our organization matches this. And it's interesting, they didn't say in the paper where this project originated. So I know of some businesses that start off separately located and are successful. And I think in that case, it's important to know that those people are aware of the complexities and problems that can occur, but they have mechanisms and shared understandings of how to resolve those problems, so that's how they start off on a better foot.
So
But
you're
from
saying that they have
Conway's law,
effective
hold on, let me
mechanisms.
finish. From Conway's law perspective about it matching, it'd be interesting to see if we say, we as a classroom are going to build a product, but now we have some need for other people, and we say, oh, well, we just go find, and what typically happens is the cheapest person. The initial cheap offer. And then you go and you try and solve it, and you realize, oh, wait, there's more problems. The person on Apollo 8, I believe, they asked him, what are you thinking? And he's like, the fact that every piece of this entire system was built by the person who made the lowest offer. Because that's how that's how the government works. We're all getting the same job, but it's who can do it for less. That's not always the case. That's why we have the private sector. Because we do realize that sometimes there's extra stuff that needs to be considered. So I think from that perspective, it's neat to look at where the organization originates and what do those members, what skill set do those members have initially.
Okay. So we're also going to touch upon the cross-cutting themes of efficiency, coordination, and identity with respect to this particular paper. But first, I would like to be done with the part related to informal communication, because another big factor which was studied by this paper was the importance of informal communication in conjunction with the challenges associated with geographic distribution. So some of the advantages, if people are working on the same location, they can approach each other without any prior appointments. Developers which are co-located, they can initiate communication easily because they know who is around. So it's a big advantage. Knowing whom to contact. Once some of the developers, they have spent a significant amount of time at the other side, they become contact people or liaisons. This is actually a good solution here for teams which are geographically distributed, that some of the developers, they can be sent to different sites where they can learn about how the work is being carried out over there and share their work planning and organization and their work structure and ethics with the team back at home. So the team would know whom to contact in the other side. This can actually lead to informal communication.
In fact, it strengthens their social network.
Social networks can also be a powerful tool for initiating informal communication. Interesting. And also video conferencing.
What I'm saying, you're missing what I'm saying. I'm not saying that they are using a social networking tool. I'm saying that social network analysis can point out the benefit of spending time in the distance organization, because the analysis tells us that likely that the people are strengthening aspects of their actual social connections to people in a way that allows them to work better, right? So I'm not saying that they should be using a tool like LinkedIn or Facebook, which they may or may not use, but that social network analysis is useful for understanding that benefit. Organizational behavior analysis is not particularly useful for understanding that consequence, although it is useful for understanding other things.
So this is an interesting insight that social network analysis at different sites can actually lead to better informal communication.
Not exactly. Social network analysis can help us understand why a particular action, like sending people to meet face-to-face, might lead to better coordination. There's a level of remove that's sort of meta-analytic here.
All right. So these are different factors which were related to the concept of informal communication. And now we're going to talk about how distance can be overcome, how the challenge of distance can be effectively overcome. We can attend to Conway's law, have a good modular design, and use it as the basis for assigning work to different sites. And the more cleanly separated the modules are, the more likely the organization can successfully develop them at different sites. Secondly, to the extent possible, we should split the development of well-understood products where architectures, plans, and processes are likely to be stable, because change management is hard. And instability will greatly increase the need for communication. Thirdly, we should be able to document the changes effectively, the changes, refinements, and the decisions reached in different multi-site meetings, which can save many troublesome misunderstandings. These are some of the ways in which the authors think that distance as a challenge can be overcome.
How does the documentation not have a long effect with time.
Of course, it can have a long effect in time.
But my understanding is what you're saying is that's the better option?
By
Because that means
documenting,
adding
by
more people.
documenting changes, we are recording changes, in contrast to not recording them. We know
But
that.
that takes work. So what you're proposing to me is you're saying, oh, it's all gonna be better because I have to do two things. Hold on, you have
The
to.
different developers at different sites, they have the most updated version of which technology is being
No,
used.
no, what I'm saying is, what that reads to me is you're saying, I have to now document everything I'm doing.
Mhm.
So that takes time, and I'm gonna argue it's double time. And then I also now have to go read everything that is done.
You do not have to document everything that you're doing. That is already planned. You are documenting whatever you are doing that is contrary to the plan, which might not be that much as compared to.
So the plan must be fully vetted before you start? I'm confused about how this is,
Of course, the
in
plan
your place.
is always fully vetted before the product development starts. But there are unanticipated events which occur, and those unanticipated events need to be recorded.
so this is not like a waterfall, an agile structure that you're arguing for?
Yes.
Okay.
Because in this particular example, they were talking about developing a real-time embedded system. And the changes that maybe you are looking for are operational, not related to development phase. Like when the product will actually start working. They are the difficulties related to its operation. They are separate as compared to when it was being developed. And then how can we establish informal communication across different sites? There are different insights here. Front load travel, don't postpone using the travel budget. Bring people who will need to communicate together early on. The people which are key players in different sites which need to collaborate together, come up with a solution. They need to be on board early on, and effective, and then travel should be planned effectively across different sites to create a pool of liaisons from time to time. The people at one site, they can travel to the other side, and they can see for themselves how the work is being done at the other side, and that can lead to informal communication. Try to send gregarious people who will enjoy and be effective in this role, who are good communicators, who have good observatory skills, and at the end we can always use tools and practices to address real problems. Distributed organizations desperately need tools that make it easier to find availability of people and to have more effective cross-site meetings, especially spontaneous ad hoc sessions. So, concluding the talk.
I have a question. From a efficiency model, is there a minimum amount of effort, resources, what have you, that can come out of this model that the authors proposed? Because to me, you threw all that out there and say this will help ensure, maybe not ensure, but will at least help ensure a successful project. So, is there a list or an ideal environment that they can point to and say, if you're trying to accomplish a project and you fit this particular structure of being sparsely knit and unbounded, that you need to make sure you have these things in place before you even attempt to do
No, they
this?
do not. They have made observations based on just one case study.
Do you think it's possible to do this?
I think that if we are conducting a research, it will take a long amount of time. We can consider different kinds of organizational structures. We can how their varying geographic distributions across the globe, the scale of their projects, and the history of their companies, and so there are a lot of problems which arise when a product is being developed. So to conclude, I would like to talk about the themes of efficiency, identity, and coordination, and also in respect to the papers that we have discussed so far. Let's begin with efficiency first. And I would also like to welcome questions, comments, and any other insights based on, first of all, the theme of efficiency. In this case, our problem was, if we stick to it, the problem was of geographic distribution, and the lack of availability of informal communication in a geographically distributed model. So efficiency in this case can be measured, how it can be measured based on effective communication and coordination between different geographically distributed teams. That is how efficiency can be measured, how effectively they coordinated, the number of problems that arose, it should be, and how they recovered from errors, how they managed change. Was the project successful? Was it developed on time?